First, I want to acknowledge that this is weird. It's late, it's a Tuesday. You might not want to be here. Sometimes I've debated whether I want to be here also. But I was Googling the average attention span for certain ages, as one does. And it turns out that the average attention span of a 6-year-old is 12 to 18 minutes. My talk clocks in about 14 to 15, so I have full faith in all of you. So without further ado, all right. At the beginning of the school year during convocation, Headmaster John Downs introduced the idea of heroic humility, something he learned from Mr. Tom. To quote Mr. Downs, quoting Mr. Tom, heroic humility is the acceptance of help as a way of validating our own existence. When he first said this, I remember just freezing in my seat. At that moment, I realized 2 important things. First, I really wanted to give a chapel talk, and second, that heroic humility was to be its subject. I have always been hesitant to accept help. When I was young, it was pride that kept me from telling my 3rd grade teacher that long division was literally the most terrible thing I have ever attempted. I'm pretty sure that's where my mild phobia of math began, but that's a whole different talk. More recently in my life, however, it has been diagnosed depression and its loyal, annoying sidekick called anxiety that have kept me from accepting help. Why have just one when you can have both? But in all seriousness, depression sucks. I'm going to use a cringy metaphor. Kind of like a toxic friend you can't get rid of because you've had them for so long you don't know what your life would be without it. Pairing this with constant debilitating anxiety is a killer combination, literally. It got worse when I became a freshman. I remember a few things from that year clearly. First, attending the first night service and wondering if I'd accidentally been inducted into a cult instead of boarding school. Constantly wondering if what I was wearing was in dress code, and then promptly wondering why we have one at all if no one follows it. Getting my first essay grade back from Mr. Whiting and wondering whether I'd fail out of school in the first month. Or, my favorite, Mrs. Keller Coffee spinning a cheerful tale of how exactly she would kidnap our English class and keep us in her basement. It was a joke, I think. I stay alert just in case. But I remember the most from that year was dealing with the worst bout of depression I had to date. I spiraled hard, where every inconvenience felt like a tragedy, and getting out of bed seemed physically impossible. I was always wondering if I was a burden. I wondered how, if I couldn't seem to make it through my first year of high school, how will I ever make it through college? Promptly realized that I can't envision myself in college because I couldn't see the point of planning for a future I thought I wouldn't have. My sophomore year after COVID was a complete KO. I felt awful, purposeless. Like no achievement I could earn would ever be good enough to make me feel human again. Founding Brooks Books Club did help me find a solid support system, thank you, Ms. Sherman. Yet, I still didn't really ask for help. So I suffered in silence. Well, not silence. More like jokes about my own mental health that were probably less than tasteful, as Lily can attest. In truth, I needed something to push me over the edge before I could truly get the help I needed. This push came from a conversation between me, Lily, and Miss Sherman. I don't know what it is about the pressure of finishing a Spanish project due in 15 minutes is, but suddenly I was telling them everything in the corner of that library. I told them how I knew how I felt wasn't okay, but I was frustrated with myself for not being able to handle it on my own. I vividly remember Miss Sherman asking me that if someone else was struggling like I was, would I judge them for it like I was judging myself? Ashamed, my answer was an immediate no. How could I? It was around that moment I made my decision to seek outside help. At the time, Lily and I joked that my struggle with depression was the beginning of a really good chapel talk, and that if I finally got the help I needed, I could finish it, like a reward of sorts. I remember her personally promising me that we'd get through this together, and that we would one day finish that non-existent chapel talk. And then I realized she had said we, as if it was our mental illness to deal with, and when she had reassuringly squeezed my hands, I suddenly remembered what it felt like to be unconditionally loved. She smiled at me, and in it, I saw a glimpse of my future that, for once, did not scare me. That very night, on the car ride home, I opened up to my mom about my struggles and expressed I would like to talk to a therapist. She was very understanding, and after a few tears and a few days, I had my first therapy appointment. Thank you. That was perfect. I'm all for comedic timing. All right, So I had my first therapy appointment, and then everything was rainbows and romanticization, and my life is now perfect. As you can imagine, this is not the end of this talk. Turns out the hardest part about having been diagnosed with depression is not the depression, it's recovering from it. It's having the willpower to even try. Yes, I reached out, yes, I was in therapy, but it was frustrating. I felt like I was getting nowhere with my therapist at the time. The same was true for my personal relationships. Where I'd once found comfort from my loved ones, something went wrong. I wasn't grateful anymore. In fact, I was the opposite. The worst symptom of my depression in the end was not being sad. It was being so incredibly angry. Suddenly, when people I cared about would express their affection or try to help me, I would lash out badly. Say terrible things I didn't mean. It was like my evil side had come out and I couldn't make it stop. My friends, my parents, and other people were just trying to help, and for some reason, I couldn't let them. I was stuck in a perpetual cycle of anger and guilt that stunted my progress and left me feeling helpless. After spending months stuck in this awful cycle, and an even longer time in therapy, I slowly realized why I was so frustrated. By the way, I say the phrase "I realized" a lot in this talk. It wasn't genuine anger at being helped that made me act out. It was actually born from the shame of being loved, and it was a lot of that shame. Somehow, deep down, a little part of me still believed that I didn't deserve the help I so desperately needed. So when my friends encouraged my vulnerability, when they did small favors for me, or when my parents or advisor asked about my day, I was ashamed that they wanted to. I was so ashamed that they cared for me that I spent so long convincing myself that they simply couldn't. And so anger became my defense, to push them away, to send the message they did not and never would deserve it. The problem was, though, in my subconscious effort to protect the people I cared about, I was actually just hurting them. So at this point in time, I had recognized that my inability to accept help was hurtful and stemmed from a lack of self-worth. I got that part. But what came next? How was I supposed to fix that? In the end, I solved this struggle kind of subconsciously. Turns out that when I let myself be swallowed by depression's fog and disassociate, I noticed a lot of things I wouldn't normally have. When I was numb like this, I could pretend that I wasn't me. Rather, I was someone from the outside looking in, a third party. This unhealthy coping mechanism allowed me to carefully watch the way people reacted to me. And without the bias, without the constant buzz of critical self-talk, everything was different, like seeing through a filtered lens. For the first time in a while, I noticed the genuine smiles my friends would give me when they saw me, the way my name was spoken with warmth and familiarity, the natural way they would laugh at my jokes, not forced, not out of pity, how they took my bad days in graceful stride, understanding written in how they would look at me, how they spoke to me. Even when I messed up and said the wrong thing at the wrong time, there was hurt, but there was also always forgiveness even before an apology left my mouth. The way Lily always held up her arms out for a hug, the way she understood that when I said I hated hugs, it actually meant yes, please, fine. The resolute sincerity in Miss Sherman's voice when she told me for the 100th time that week that she was always there for me, not a hint of annoyance, no tiredness. The way my mother's eyes would go soft and mushy when she told me she loved me. The way my dad always made sure to pick me up late from school, even when I asked, even when he pretended to complain. I also analyzed smaller interactions too. Students and faculty that I rarely talk to asking how I am or starting a conversation out of the blue. Even people simply holding doors. I recognized all of this, compartmentalized in the way my type A brain knew best, beheld the facts. And the fact was, these reactions are not from burdened people. They are not fake responses. They are genuine and caring. The fact was, whether I liked it or not, I was truly loved and cared about by a lot of people in my life. And then came the question, how do I apply my involuntary research to my situation? Once, while in another existential crisis, I texted Lily and asked her why she chooses to love me. She responded with a bunch of things she likes about me, but one thing she said really stuck out. She said that I don't choose to love you. Maybe I did when we were just starting to become friends, but now I can't help it. Now I just do. And I hate to moralize or make grand statements about life. It's cliche, I know. But after reading her response, I thought that maybe that is to be human. Maybe we all cannot help but love. We cannot help but be loved in return. Maybe love is uncontrollable. But that isn't scary. It's comforting. Comforting to realize that I have no control over how people choose to love me. I could never make them stop caring. And because it is something I have very little control over, I have to accept that it's true or I would go crazy. Because I am loved, I can allow those who love me to help me, because I deserve it. Because loving something and caring for someone drowns out all of the shitty moments and gives the better moments purpose. And who am I to deny the people who care for me that fulfillment? Who am I to deny it for myself? Applying this thought in my life is still a process. I still have days when I cannot believe that such incredible people truly do care about me. Sometimes I do lash out. Recovery is anything but linear. Some people like to say that you have to hit rock bottom before you can make a change, and I have a sneaking suspicion that I haven't even gotten there yet. But I know one thing for certain. If I ever do fall that far, there will always be people there for me. Not to help me climb out, that's my job and my job alone, but to simply sit there beside me at the bottom of that pit and hold my hand as I work up the courage to try. That's all it takes. And because every good speech includes a call to action, thank you, Public Speaking with Miss Lifter, I have 2 quick ones. First, for people that can't relate to this talk at all, congratulations. Kudos to you. I'll let you in on a secret. You are actually the people who this talk is truly about. Chances are that you know someone who is struggling. And I realize that it can be hard work to take care of someone who is determined to not be taken care of. I know because I've been in both positions. It can be exhausting. You are allowed to feel this way and not be ashamed. But I have to say, I've also been the person who needs help, and I can say that for as much as they react badly to you or shut you out, this person really needs you. Sometimes all that person needs is just you trying again and again. Keep reaching out your hand because you never know when that person will truly give up. Don't wait to reach out. Don't hesitate because you will never regret anything more than being too late. Tell the people you love that you will be there for them always. And for people who do recognize themselves in this talk, you may choose to believe that you are alone, but you aren't. It may be hard to accept now, but know eventually that there is always someone who can help you. Even if you are at the worst moment in your life, even if you think you have no one, there's always something or someone to hold on to, no matter how small. There will always be someone who will hold the door for you. There will always be someone who will smile at you even though they have no idea who you are. There will always be another friend or a complete stranger that you can reach out to or who will reach out to you first. Have the humility and bravery to accept that help because you deserve it. Because you deserve the promise of a future. The promise of a life. You are not a burden. You are human, and accepting help validates that life, validates you. And before I end, I'd like to thank a few people. Thank you to Mrs. Hardy for allowing me this space and time to give this talk as a fifth former. Thank you for reading over this talk. Your advice is invaluable. Thank you to my parents for supporting me throughout this process and always humbling me greatly in the process. Thank you to Ms. Sherman, who I would not be up here without. And thank you to my friends who helped shoulder my burdens. Thank you to everyone who has ever held a door for me. Thank you to everyone who has listened tonight. And finally, thank you to the person who first had the idea of me giving a chapel talk, even if it was a joke, who has stood by my side every second, through every obstacle. I want a future thanks to you, a future that I could not imagine without you in it. Congratulations, Lily. We finished the chapel talk. Thank you.